Right now, as you are watching this, American military aircraft are flying over small Canadian towns, not near the border, over Ontario, over Quebec, over Nova Scotia, over Newfoundland. And nobody at Canada, not the Prime Minister, not Parliament, not a single Canadian had a say. Because under an agreement signed before most of us were born, the United States does not need our permission to fly through our skies. Let that sink in for a moment. By the end of this video, you are going to understand how Canada became a refueling corridor for one of the largest military operations in decades. You will learn what other nations did when they were asked to do the same. And you will understand why nobody told Canadians it was happening. Once you see that, you will never look at the sky over your house the same way again. If you believe Canadians deserve to know what is happening in their own airspace, subscribe to this channel, because we are going to keep tracking this story. It started with a photograph. On March 12th, a resident of Moose Factory, a small community in northern Ontario along the James Bay coast, looked up and saw something unusual. Large military aircraft flying in formation directly overhead. They took photos. They sent them to the Globe and Mail. And what investigators found is extraordinary. Using publicly available flight tracking data, the Globe identified 8 American KC-135 refueling tankers operating over the James Bay region in a single 2-hour window. 8. Not passing through. Circling. Refueling something. 8 refueling tankers over a single Canadian region in a single afternoon. Think about that for a moment. And it did not stop there. Between March 12th and March 20th, flight tracking data revealed near-daily refueling operations over Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. Not a single event. Not a one-time mission. A sustained, ongoing operation with American military aircraft overhead, day after day, with transponders being switched off mid-flight. And here is where this story gets really serious. 2 Canadian defense experts reviewed the data for the Globe. James Ferguson, a NORAD specialist at the University of Manitoba, and David Burkeson, a defense historian at the University of Calgary. Both confirmed that the scale and flight patterns are consistent with one specific type of aircraft. Long-range stealth aircraft heading to the Middle East. The direct route from their base in Missouri to the Persian Gulf crosses central Canada and the Hudson Bay region, shortening flight times by hours compared to any other path. Canada is not just in the way. Canada is the shortcut. And then came the detail that changes everything. U.S. military transport aircraft landed in Gander, Newfoundland, en route to Saudi Arabia. Not flying over. Landing. On Canadian soil. The first confirmed use of Canadian territory as a physical staging point for operations in the Middle East. Let that sit for a second. With what permission? With what debate? With what vote? None. And here is where the contrast becomes devastating. When the United States needed to fly aircraft through Allied airspace to reach the Middle East, it asked European nations for access. France looked at the request and gave a clear answer. No. French President Emmanuel Macron publicly stated that the operations were being conducted, and I want to make sure I get this right, outside international law. France closed its airspace to any aircraft involved in those operations. Full stop, no exceptions. No loophole. That is not a small country making a symbolic gesture. That is not a token protest. That is not a polite diplomatic note. That is a founding NATO member, one of the most powerful militaries in Europe, telling the most powerful nation on Earth, not through our skies. You want to fly those missions through our airspace? Find another route. And France was not alone. When an American long-range aircraft returned from the Middle East, it could not fly over France. It could not fly over Spain. It was forced to detour over the Atlantic Ocean, around the entire Iberian Peninsula, adding hours to the before, finally reaching its base in England. European nations forced American military aircraft to fly around their countries. Now think about what happened in Canada. The same aircraft that Europe turned away found a route directly over Canadian towns, over Moose Factory, over East Maine, Quebec, over Nova Scotia, over Newfoundland. No detour, no debate, no refusal. Why? Because of one agreement, NORAD. The North American Aerospace Defense Command, established in 1958 when the greatest threat to this continent was Soviet aircraft crossing the Arctic. Under that agreement, American military aircraft can transit Canadian airspace without seeking formal permission. Canada's own Department of Global Affairs confirmed it. The United States is not required to ask. Now, this might sound like a boring technical detail. It is the most important sentence in this entire video. An agreement designed to protect Canada from foreign threats is now being used to make Canada part of foreign operations that Canada chose not to join. Let me say that again. Canada did not join these operations. Canada's government has said it supports diplomatic solutions. And yet, Canadian skies are being used day after day to support the very missions Canada publicly distances itself from. Canada carries the association without having any voice in the decisions. That is the worst of both worlds. So here is my question to you. Should Canadian airspace require Canadian permission? Or is a piece of paper from 1958 enough? Tell me in the comments. And when the Globe and Mail asked Global Affairs Canada whether the government was even notified about the March 12th flights, the spokesperson would not answer. Not yes, not no, would not comment. France said no. Europe forced detours. Canada's government cannot confirm whether it was told. That is not a partnership. That is not an alliance. That is one country using another country's sovereign sky because a 70-year-old agreement says it can. If you are watching this in the first 7 days, hit the hype button below. This story was uncovered by one journalist and 2 defense experts. It deserves the attention of every Canadian. Now let me be clear about something. NORAD has served this continent for nearly 7 decades. The shared defense of North American airspace is not a mistake. It is one of the most successful defense partnerships in modern history. I am not suggesting Canada should tear up NORAD, but the question is not whether NORAD should exist. The question is whether an agreement designed to stop Soviet aircraft in 1958 should automatically make Canada a logistics corridor for Middle East operations in 2026, without so much as a phone call. Here is what now exists and cannot be undone. The flight paths are established. The refueling patterns are documented. American military aircraft have landed on Canadian soil. Every day this continues. Canada becomes more deeply embedded in operations it did not choose, did not vote for, and may not have even been informed about. But France proved something that matters. France proved that saying no is possible, that sovereignty over your own sky is not something that expires. That even inside a military alliance, a nation can draw a line and say, this is our airspace, and these are our rules. Every flight path over Nova Scotia, every refueling loop over James Bay, every transport landing in Gander, that is Canadian sovereignty being exercised by someone else. If this story matters to you, hit the like button. We need this to reach every Canadian who looks up at their sky and has no idea what is flying through it. In a recent video, we showed you how every ally walked away when Trump demanded obedience. Today, you saw what happens when one ally never got the chance to walk away. If you have not seen that video, it is on your screen right now. I will see you there.